Hey, Kristen. Lovely to see you.
Hi, Felicity. It's good to see you too, my friend. This is
Uh,
fun.
yeah, really fun. Last time we saw each other, we were being drenched by a hose held by one of our small people.
Indeed.
Pointed in
Or
the wrong
trying to
direction.
avoid being drenched by a hose. Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed. Although I was thinking of your boys yesterday because we finally got that front yard splash pad set up. And I was thinking,
Ah,
oh,
fun.
Rufus and Billy would love it. So
Yeah.
next time. And we won't get
Absolutely.
drenched by the hose that way
Yes.
either.
Yes. Absolutely. More control. Sounds good.
Absolutely.
Um,
Yeah.
so for those of our viewers who don't know who we are, let me introduce you. So many of you will have heard of Kristen. Kristen Wetherell, a writer and editor and mum to two little people, one very small person, John, who is a month and a half or less.
Very good. Yeah. He'll be 6 weeks on Monday. Yes.
Yeah, gorgeous little boy. And Joanna, who is a similar age to my smallest, and so we have a lot of fun. And I've been grateful for Kristen's friendship since we moved to America a while ago, and it's been a joy to hang out. And
Yeah, I'll never forget meeting Jonathan for the first time at one of our church campuses. He had a pop-up bookstore going for one of Nancy Guthrie's events, and I had heard of him from my time at Unlocking the Bible, which is where I worked for a number of years. And I said, "Oh, you're Jonathan Carswell," because UTB was working with him. And he said, "Yes, yeah, we just moved to the States. My wife is Felicity, and we have two little boys." And it was just so cut to the heart. And I thought, this family that just moved from overseas, that is a big change. And I'm so grateful for our friendship. And I'm so grateful that we ended up getting together and
yeah, well, I'm so grateful that
sisters
you
in
reached out.
Christ. And
Absolutely, and it's been a joy.
it's been
A
really
joy.
fun.
I've been so grateful for a friend and
Yeah.
encourager in the midst of, as you say, a big international move. And I'm really excited about
Yeah.
your newest output, the 12
Yes.
Faithful Women
I have a copy
book.
here myself.
Yeah.
It's exciting.
I love this. So it's a Gospel Coalition kind of publication, isn't it? And you and Melissa Kruger have edited it. So
Yes.
I'm excited to hear more about it. So can you kind of just give us an outline? So if I give a vague outline, so it's 12 chapters with a different woman from throughout history, really, and their life story, kind of slightly truncated because it is only a chapter, but then, and the theme of the book being steadfastness. So in each of these stories, the authors and you as the editor have drawn out this theme of steadfastness. Is that a
That's right.
fair summary?
Yeah, so the Gospel Coalition, they had to postpone their women's conference because of the coronavirus. But originally, Melissa reached out and said, "We have this women's conference planned on the Book of James, and we're going to be looking at and studying the Book of James and this theme of steadfastness, steadfast faith. And we would love to create kind of a companion resource to go along with the conference." So that's looking a little bit different right now since the conference is postponed, but that's where this idea came from. What does it look like to be a steadfast Christian? What is the key to that steadfastness? And so I love this book because we have a woman as early as Catherine de Bourbon, who was a Reformation woman, to a woman as modern as Johnny Erickson, Tada, and everyone in between. And it's just so encouraging to see how Christ has stayed the same forever. And he never changes. And for all of these women, they found him to be exactly who he says he is. And every one of their stories is just a little bit different. So I'm hopeful that the women who pick up this book will be motivated to endure as well.
I loved the variety of women. As you say, it spreads the ages, but also it's some of them I hadn't heard of, which I loved that, because there are the classic biographies that we go to, and a range of authors as well. So actually all written in quite different styles, and I thought it was a really great, especially if someone has not been into biography before, this book is a good persuader as to why biography is wonderfully encouraging and helpful. And I thought it was a really excellent. I liked as well the format where you had the questions at the end, helping us to just think through how these lives and how they've clung to the Lord and we can be encouraged by that.
Good. I'm so glad you like that part. I was really excited about that section. We're calling it Lessons from the Faithful, and we wanted it to be an area of the book where readers could study the word. So to have that element, because we know that truly it's the word that changes our hearts and makes us more like Christ by the Spirit. But also to get us to connect their story with ours. And what does that look like? So I'm very excited about how that application could help people.
Yeah, and I think that's a really helpful thing about biography as a whole, isn't it? The idea that as we kind of walk along with that person in history, almost kind of we're journeying with them, maybe even having a conversation with them. If it's an autobiography, that's a wonderful thing. And so as we're walking along with them, we're learning more about what it is to endure, to hold fast, to walk with Jesus. I think that's just a wonderful thing about biography. I don't know if you've heard people talking about the value of getting to know the older saints in your church family. And it's a bit like an extension of that, isn't it? Kind of spending some time with saints of the past or the present, as you say, with people like Johnny Erickson Tada and others.
Yeah, it's so true. I was thinking in preparation for our discussion right now, I was thinking about the verse from Hebrews 12:1 that talks about the great cloud of witnesses. And scripture says, since we're surrounded by this great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus. So Christ is he's always the object of our faith. But then there's an additional encouragement from this great cloud of witnesses who've gone before us, who are walking beside us, these witnesses who testify to how great he is and how worthy he is for us to fix our eyes on him. And that's so wonderful that we have that testimony.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm curious, Felicity, what you have read plenty more biographies than I have, and I'm curious to know, have there been certain books that have impacted you the most that you would recommend to people, either as a starting place or just as a fantastic read?
I do love a good read. I'm a book reader anyway, as a kind of English student, and then as a keen book reader of Christian books, married to a Christian bookseller. I don't
married to the founder of 10 of those.
Yeah, yes. Absolutely.
You have many books to sort through.
Fortunately, I was into books before I married the man, so all is well. I do love books, and I have always loved biography. I became a Christian when I was a student at university, so 21, 22, and I remember very clearly some student workers in my church or in camps that I was involved in placing biographies in my hands and just saying, you've got to just get your head around this, read this person's life, and you'll have a better understanding of what it is to follow Christ. And I think some of the early ones were the story of Jim Elliot, Elizabeth Elliot, Hudson Taylor, those kind of things. In fact, our children, their middle names are Jim Elliot and Hudson Taylor. Both Jonathan and I have been impacted so much by their lives.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
That's so cool.
My family are slightly bemused, but we love the names. So I think ones that have really impacted me, there's one called Evidence Not Seen by Darlene Deibler Rose. I don't know whether you've come across that one. She's just this incredible lady back in the Second World War. She was out in Japan, and she got taken, and Papua New Guinea, and she got taken to a concentration camp, and there's a whole story that goes in, but her tale is just incredible. I guess similarly, Corrie ten Boom, which I know you've got a chapter on her in the book, but her story, The Hiding Place, is hugely powerful. And then Elizabeth Elliot. I think when I was younger, in my sort of mid-20s, trying to work out what it was to be a Christian woman and to live out the life fully, I think reading Elizabeth Elliot, reading her story, but also her books on that one called Passion and Purity, that kind of thing, really helped me, just reading of her life and then thinking through what that means for me. And then recently, actually, there's a series of books by someone called Claire Heath White, who she's written 3 books for adults, which are similar to your book, where each chapter is on a different woman from history. So her first one is called Old Wives Clubs. It's on the 18th century wives of kind of famous Christian men. And what I love about her writing is that the women are so real. They're not perfect. I love that in biography, that you're not being presented with a kind of picture perfect person. Like, you know, that with having investigated Susanna Spurgeon, she was in no way perfect, but in her imperfection, in their imperfections, they cling to Christ. And for lots of these women, so Claire Heath-White has written a couple on the Victorians, and then also one on the 16th century kind of Reformation wives. And they're just so encouraging to think that you can keep going even when plagued by sin and suffering and circumstances that get in the way. So I found those really helpful. And actually, she wrote a children's book quite recently called Everyone a Child Should Know, which we've been doing with our boys recently. It's just wonderful, kind of 50 odd stories of people throughout church history. So from an early age, I love that you can introduce biography from an early age. I mean, our boys are fascinated by anyone who, well, particularly if they're involved in sport or fighting, it turns out, being boys. But yeah, so I found those to be particularly impactful in my life. So you've,
wonderful.
Through researching and editing and writing this book, so were you into biography before then, or did this kind of awaken an understanding of biography? How did you, have you had a similar experience?
I would say I was into biography to an extent. I try to spread out my reading genres so that I'm reading broadly different types of books. And I've always read biography, but not a lot of them. So this was helpful just to learn about more women who were out there, and reading about Susanna Spurgeon. That is actually a book that I'd recommend to people, is Ray Rhodes's biography. It's recent, as of the last 2 or 3 years. It came out from Moody, called Susie. And I absolutely loved it. So I would highly commend that to anyone listening. But I have been more motivated actually since I married my husband to read biography, like at least 1 or 2 a year, because he reads them regularly.
Okay.
And as a pastor, tends to read about pastors from history and how they endured, especially the struggles of pastoral ministry. So I'm just trying to think of a few off the top of my head that have impacted me. I won't get into the long version, but I have a history with Lyme disease, as you know, Felicity. And when I was going through the thick of that battle, Johnny's book, A Place of Healing, was very helpful for me. And it's part, Christian nonfiction, Christian living, but it's also part memoir, because her story is so wrapped up in the lessons that she has been taught by the Lord. That was incredibly encouraging for me to press on. And at the time as well, I read the biography of I don't know how you say her name. Do you know Lilias Trotter?
Lilias Trotter, yeah.
Lilias Trotter.
Yeah.
A Passion for the Impossible.
I read that recently.
I think I read that in like 2 days. I couldn't put it down.
Yeah, she's fascinating, isn't she? Just how she went.
She really is.
Yeah, without any.
You might hear my baby. Sorry, everybody. My baby's crying in the background. But yeah, her story is so interesting. You're right, because she's an artist and she has a gifting, and yet she also has a pull to be a missionary to Algerians. And so what does she do? There's this division there, and yet the Lord allows her to use her artistic skills in the role of missionary. And I personally resonated with that because I studied music theater in college and always thought that that's what I would do. And yet the Lord said, no, you're not going to do that in the typical sense.
Yeah.
And then Lilias also had a heart condition and some various physical maladies, and that really resonated with me. So pick that one up, everybody. A Passion for the Impossible. That was excellent. I'm trying to think what else. And then I recently read the Ian Murray's biography on Martin Lloyd-Jones.
Oh yes, I haven't read that one. I've heard good things about it.
Ian Murray's, anything that he writes is going to be very compelling and
it's masterful,
just really solid on the facts. Yeah. But Martin Lloyd-Jones he was on fire for the truth of Scripture and really holding fast to Christ in that. So I would really recommend that. But I love what you said, Felicity, about biographies that stress the humanity of the subject. is oddly encouraging because it lets you know that you're not alone.
Yeah, absolutely.
in your struggles. So
yeah. We're striving, and I think that's where actually your book is really helpful. We're striving to be steadfast and to endure, and in that the Lord uses that mightily. And so many of the women and so many of the biographies that we read, you don't know, the women didn't know really the fruit that was going to be born from their lives. I mean, Lilias Trotter being an example, I mean, it just looked pathetic for years, and then huge fruit. And even, you know, Jim and Elizabeth Elliot, legendary names now, but they didn't know. And who would have thought? Well, the Lord, the Lord, obviously. But I really think this book is a great place to start on biography. I'm really grateful that you and TGC have brought it about, because I'm really, I love to introduce people to biography, and I think this is a great starting point. So I'm excited that more people might get into further biographies through this and enjoy this very well written, very well put together book. So thank you very much for talking to me, and we will see each other again, no doubt, surrounded by water and small children sometime soon.
No doubt. No doubt.